wealth of this world, position, power, and all that comes with it. That's what it's talking about. Now, note that in the very same chapter where Jesus retells this ancient parable, he starts by warning his disciples, his 12, right, that they cannot serve both God and money. And this teaching offends the Pharisees who loved money. Luke 16:14. After this response, Jesus tells the parable of Lazarus and the rich man. So the entire point of the story, and it is a story, that's exactly what it is, a parable with hidden meanings, is to shine a light on the Pharisees who loved money, and to tell a parable against them, to warn others not to be hard-hearted towards the poor. Remember, they were standing right in front of him, and they didn't like that when he said this, right? They pointed them out, he exposed them as money mongers, money lovers. That's it. The parable is not about the afterlife. It's a pre-existing story used as a parable by numerous others prior to Jesus, that Jesus recycled to teach us something about compassion for the poor. As author Steve Gregg notes, many Christians believe that the traditional view of hell, eternal suffering, is one of the very pillars of the Christian faith, without which the death of Christ itself would be rendered meaningless. If this pillar is removed or undermined, the whole gospel message, they feel, becomes destabilized and in danger of collapse. Yet when we delve into the scriptural teaching about hell, what we will find most striking is the infrequency of its being mentioned in Scripture. Hell, conceived as a place of future judgment, is not found in the Old Testament at all. This represents more than 3/4 of the biblical material, covering a period of 4,000 years of divine revelation. What we find here is essentially silence. From the book by Steve Gregg, All You Want to Know About Hell. So if the doctrine of eternal torment isn't found in the Old Testament scriptures, and it's not, and if this parable of the rich man and Lazarus isn't about the afterlife, then where did the idea of an eternal hell come from? It all started in the intertestamental period, the period of time between the end of the Old Testament scriptures and the coming of Christ. Plus, the originators of the concept of hell were not Jewish, and they were certainly not the followers of Jesus, they were pagans. So is it pointing to the Egyptians? Specifically, the ideas of a paradise for the righteous separated by a gulf from the place of fire and torment where the unrighteous were tormented in flames are all concepts. Here we go. It's exactly what we found years ago. They're all concepts found in the Talmud, the Jewish Talmud. But the writers of the Talmud took these ideas from the Greeks and the Egyptians of their day. So it's been added to your Americanized English Bible versions by these revisionists, etc. Possibly. Or prior to that. Okay, so it's come from the writers of the Talmud, who took these ideas from the Greeks and Egyptians of their day, and these ideas were incorporated into other Jewish writings like 1 Enoch and the teachings of various Jewish rabbis at the time during the 400-year gap of time between the end of the Old Testament scriptures and the coming of Christ. Okay, so this book of Enoch mentioned in the Bible might be a completely different one to the one that you have today, the Gnostic one. Okay? This one mentioned in the Bible may not be the one that they will claim they have today. It may have been something written later on. Let's just say, for example, for argument's sake, that it's pseudepigrapha. They don't know who actually wrote it. Okay? Even though it's got the book of Enoch, the name of Enoch, and it could be, as proven by theologians, to have been of a later century, say, just for argument's sake. We're not saying this is the exact era, let's say the 14th or 15th century, by someone who was trying to give people the answers that they were seeking. Yeah? Where did Cain get his wife from? Etc., etc. Specifically, the idea of a paradise for the righteous separated by a gulf from the place of fire and torment where the unrighteous were, tormented in flames, are all concepts found in the Talmud. But the writers of the Talmud took these ideas from the Greeks and the Egyptians of their day, and these ideas were incorporated into other Jewish writings like 1 Enoch and the teachings of various Jewish rabbis at the time during the 400-year gap of time between the end of the Old Testament scriptures and the coming of Christ. What's important to note here is this: these ideas were never revealed by God to the Jewish people through the Old Testament prophets. They are based on very common Greek notions of Hades and on pagan concepts of the afterlife. We're going to look at where Hades, we're going to define Hades in a minute. Okay? Not on the teachings of the Old Testament scriptures, nor on the teachings of Jesus. To this particular writer, this author, it is very significant that the concept of hell as taught by those who embrace eternal suffering is not found in the Old Testament. Furthermore, it is very suspicious to this author, this writer, that the concepts incorporated into the doctrine came from non-biblical pagan sources that had infiltrated the Hebrew faith just prior to the coming of Christ. For further study, please read his book, Jesus Undefeated, Condemned the False Doctrine of Eternal Torment, available on Kindle, print and audio. So you can probably get the audio from this particular website. If you can get this audio download for free, then we will put that link below our video on our channel, right? Okay, so someone is trying to pull the wool over your eyes. Okay, it's from the Talmud. It's been added to your Americanized English Bible versions that you have today, and it's allegorical, metaphorical. It's a story, a parable with hidden meaning behind it. It's not necessarily true, and it's not necessarily mythical either. Okay. It's a lesson to be learned. Jesus talking to the Pharisees, pointing them out, exposing them for being money mongers, money lovers. Okay, so let's have a look at the meaning of Hades. This article is about the Greek god. Okay, see Greek underworld and Christian views on Hades. Hades, ancient Greek, from the ancient Greek, Romanized, etc., etc. In the ancient Greek religion and mythology is the god of the dead and the king of the underworld. It's all mythical, right? With which his name became synonymous. Hades was the elder son of Cronus and Rhea, although this also made him the last to be regurgitated by his father. He and his brothers, Zeus and Poseidon, defeated their father's generation of gods, the Titans, and claimed joint rulership over the cosmos, or the universe. Hades received the underworld, Zeus the sky, and Poseidon the sea. These are these different sons, these brothers, right? They each received a certain realm. Okay. He and his brothers Zeus and Poseidon defeated their father's generation of gods, the Titans, and claimed joint rulership over the cosmos. Hades received the underworld, Zeus the sky, and Poseidon the sea, with the solid earth, the long province of Gaia, available to all three concurrently. In artistic depictions, Hades is typically portrayed holding a bident and wearing his helm with Cerberus. Okay. The three-headed guard dog of the underworld, standing at his side. Is that often referred to in horror movies as the Hound of Hell, or something like that? It's the guardian at the gates of hell. The underworld. Okay. This here is Cerberus Christus. Check out H.G. Wells' book, The Outline of History. He goes into great detail on that. And he's got this little jug on his head, Greek looking. Yeah, that's the statue of Serapis, a mixture of the Egyptian gods Osiris, Horus, and Serapis. Roman era mythographers eventually equated the Etruscan god Aita and the Roman gods Dispater, that means the father. Yeah. Pater means Peter or father, and supposedly in the Latin it means a male genitalia. And Orcus with Hades, and merged all these figures into Pluto, a Latinization of Pluton, ancient Greek, Romanized Platon. Itself a euphemism, title meaning the rich one, often given to Hades. Name. The origin of Hades' name is uncertain, but has generally been seen as meaning the unseen one, or since antiquity, ancient times, right? An extensive selection of Plato's dialogue, Catullus, is devoted to the etymology of the god's name, or the origins of it, in which Socrates is arguing for a folk etymology, not from unseen but from his knowledge, I deny, of all noble things. Could this be Adonai? Not sure. Sounds very similar. Of all noble things. Modern linguists have proposed the Proto-Greek form Oides, unseen. The earliest attested form is Aides, which lacks a proposed dogma, Martin Litchfield West argues instead for an original meaning of the one who presides over beating up, from the University of Death. In Homeric and Ionic Greek, he was known as Aides. Other poetic variations of the name include Idonius, etc., etc. The name as it came to be known in classical times was Hades. Later the iota became silent, with the I there. Okay. Then a subscript marking, and finally omitted entirely. Perhaps from fear of pronouncing his name, around the 5th century BC, the Greeks started referring to Hades as Pluton, or Ploton, with a root meaning wealthy and so forth. Guess into a great deal of that. Mythology. In Greek mythology, Hades, the god of the Greek underworld, was the firstborn son of the Titans, Cronus, and so forth. Okay. King of the underworld. It's all related to him. Abduction of Persephone. Visitors in the underworld. There's all these mythical stories there. Lovers of Hades. Other works. Cult and epithets. There's a lot of information there. Artistic representations. Realm of Hades. In older Greek myths, the realm of Hades is the misty and gloomy abode of the dead, also called Erebus. Remember that mountain where the plane crashed? Mount Erebus. Probably named after that god of that Greek myth. Where all place. Where all mortals go when they die. Very few mortals could leave Hades once they entered. The exceptions, Heracles and Theseus, are heroic, etc., etc. In Roman mythology, the entrance to the underworld located at Avernus, a crater near Cumae, was the route Aeneas, whatever his name is, used to descend to the realm of the dead, and so forth. For Hellenes, these are the Greeks, the Hellenes, that's what they were called before they were known as the Greeks. The deceased entered the underworld by crossing the Styx, the river Styx, ferried across by Charon or Chiron, who charged an obolus, a small coin for a passage placed in the mouth of the deceased by pious relatives. Paupers and the friendless gathered for hundreds of years, etc., etc. There's more information there. Owing to its appearance in the New Testament of the Bible, Hades also has a distinct meaning in Christianity. And it's all here. Hades family tree, sort of planets, right? Uranus, Zeus, it's all Greek. Yeah? These Greek gods. Aphrodite, Dionysus, Hermes, all Greek mythology, right? And then we have Sheol. In the Hebrew Bible is the underworld place of stillness and darkness which lies after death. Within the Hebrew Bible there are few, often brief and nondescript mentions of Sheol, seemingly describing it as a place where both the righteous and the unrighteous dead go, regardless of their moral choices in life. The implications of Sheol within the text are therefore somewhat unclear. It may be interpreted as either a generic metaphor describing the grave into which all humans invariably descend, or an actual state of afterlife within Israelite thought. Okay? So there you go. It's either the grave, where everybody ends up, or in the Jewish or Israelite thought, a state of afterlife, a place of the afterlife, where both go, regardless if you're a righteous person or non-righteous. Though such practices are forbidden, the inhabitants of Sheol can, under some circumstances, be summoned by the living, as when the witch of Endor calls up the spirit of Samuel for King Saul. Okay, according to the Bible, right? What's that? The magic rites of Abraham, all that sort of stuff. We can call up demons, and you can also call up saints and all that sort of stuff, angels, whatever. Something along those lines. While the Hebrew Bible appears to describe Sheol as a permanent place of the dead, in the Second Temple period, roughly 500 BCE to 70 CE, the Christian era, a more diverse set of ideas developed. In some texts, Sheol is considered the home of both the righteous and the wicked, separated into respective compartments. In others, it was considered a place of punishment meant for the wicked dead alone. When the Hebrew scriptures were translated into Greek in ancient Alexandria, it's a city built not far from Egypt, or an extension of Egypt, right? Okay, so it's translated into Greek. The Septuagint, sometimes referred to as the Greek Old Testament or the translation of the 70, and abbreviated as LXX, is the earliest extant Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible from the original biblical Hebrew. Okay? The full Greek title derives from the story recorded, etc., etc. Supposedly there was actually 72 involved. Hellenized Jews writing the Testaments into Greek, the Old Testament into Greek, etc. Yeah? So it was done around 200 BCE. The word Hades, i.e. the Greek underworld, was substituted for Sheol, owing to its similarities to the underworld of Greek mythology. Yeah? So because the Greeks wanted to make it very Greeky, Greek flavoured, they changed things. So they changed Hades to, or substituted it for Sheol. Yeah. Instead of having Sheol in there, they changed it to Hades. Otherwise it wouldn't be Greeky, would it? Because it was similar to the underworld of Greek mythology. The gloss of Sheol as Hades is reflected in the New Testament, wherein Hades is both the underworld of the dead and the personification of the evil it represents. So that's Greek, right? Greek mythology. It's mythological. Hebrew Bible. Sheol is mentioned 66 times throughout the Hebrew Bible. The first mentions of Sheol within the text associated with the state of death and a sense of eternal finality. Jacob avows that he will go down to Sheol, or go down to the grave, still mourning the apparent death of his son Joseph. Later in the book of Genesis, the same formula is repeated when describing the sorrow that would befall Jacob, should another of his sons, Benjamin, not return to him with his remaining brothers. Because remember, Joseph kept them back. Okay. So Jacob said, hey, where's your younger brother? Where's the youngest one? Oh, this leader in Egypt said had to leave him behind. Had to stay with him. So he was quite upset because that was his youngest, right? And, oh mate, I hope nothing happens to him. And he's really worried about him, right? And he wept over it. Sheol makes its next appearance during the episode of Korah in the book of Numbers. After Korah attempts to rouse the Israelites to rebel against Moses, Moses vows that Yahweh will provide his legitimacy by splitting open the earth to hurl Korah and his conspirators into Sheol, into the grave. Sure enough, as he finishes the speech, Yahweh splits the earth open, causing Korah, his family and all of his possessions too, as the text describes it, into Sheol alive. The grave, alive. In the book of, well, they're alive, so they end up in this grave, right? Buried alive, probably. In the book of Deuteronomy, Moses sings that the anger of Yahweh is a flame which burns in the depths of Sheol, consuming the entire earth from the bottom up. Subsequent mentions of Sheol in the Tanakh, it's the Hebrew Bible or Tanakh, also known in Hebrew as Mikra, is a canonical collection of Hebrew scriptures comprising the Torah, the Nevi'im, and the Ketuvim. Different branches of Judaism and Samaritanism have maintained different versions of the canon, and so forth. And it depicts it as a representation of death, suggesting that entry into Sheol is an unavoidable consequence of dying. Yeah. These days you can get cremated, so you don't get buried, right? Yeah, but the common practice before that was you get put in a coffin, you get put in your grave. 1 Samuel describes Yahweh as the one who brings souls down to Sheol, or down to the grave. And 2 Samuel further cements Sheol as humanity's ultimate post-mortem destination. Yep, you die, you go into the grave. You get buried, right? 1 Kings uses going down to Sheol as a metaphor. It's a metaphor. Okay? An explanation for what happens when you die. Okay? Describing those who go down to it both in peace and in blood. Okay, in times of peace and turmoil, probably. The prophet Isaiah expounds on Sheol to great lengths during some of his sermons. The prophet Isaiah expounds on Sheol, or goes into great depth, on Sheol to great lengths during some of his sermons, personifying it as possessing an ever-increasing hunger for living people, with a great propensity for the souls of sinners, and where pleas to Yahweh cannot escape. Ezekiel, during his prophecy of Egypt's downfall, describes Egypt metaphorically, descending into Sheol as a dead person would. So it's metaphorical, it's not actual. Okay? They'll just be this nation that dies off. They all go to their grave. Okay? Where all the spirits of the dead, as well as other fallen empires, such as Assyria, jeer and mock its fall from might. So they're laughing, smirking at Egypt because it once was a power and it became nothing. The remaining mentions of Sheol lie in the poetic literature of the Hebrew Bible. Job mentions Sheol in several of his laments, or lamentations, calling it his home as he lies in anguish. There's like songs, right? Poems, whatever. And yearning for death to take him there, to put an end to his suffering. Sheol is also mentioned in several psalms, again as the grave of humanity. Other biblical names for Sheol were Abaddon, found in Psalms 88:11, Job 28:22, and Proverbs 15:11, and Sahat, corruption in the Hebrew, found in Isaiah 38:17 and Ezekiel 28:8. Interpretation. Even within the realm of Jewish thought, the understanding of Sheol was often inconsistent. This would later manifest in part with the Sadducee-Pharisee ideological rift. They had different ideas, so they were probably arguing amongst each other, right? No, we're right. No, you're wrong. No, we're right. No, we are. You're wrong. All that sort of stuff. Among other things, they disagreed on whether relevancy should lie more prominently in the world of living or in the realm of an afterlife. The lack of a clear belief structure surrounding Sheol lends the idea to a number of interpretations, namely one which imagines Sheol as a concrete state of the afterlife, or one which envisions Sheol as a metaphor for death as a whole. It's just an explanation, right? Yeah. About what happens when you die. To the latter's end, certain editions of the Bible translate the term Sheol as generic terms such as grave or pit. For example, the Christian KJV and NIV and Jewish JPS Tanakh, while others, for example the Christian NAB and NASB, the New American Standard Bible, and Jewish Korean Jerusalem Bible, preserve it as a proper noun. Distinguishing Sheol between a realm and a metaphor is the crux of several unanswered questions surrounding its nature. So that's basically the crutch of it. Perhaps owing to the evolution of its interpretation, some aspects of Sheol as described in the Hebrew Bible appear contradictory. Those in Sheol remember nothing, not even Yahweh, yet elsewhere its inhabitants possess an otherwise impossible perception of earthly events, even those which occur after their demise, or after their death. Police to Yahweh cannot escape Sheol, and yet Yahweh remains its unequivocal master. Those who descend into Sheol cannot escape it, yet Yahweh raises souls from it. So, what's that indicating? You die, you go into the grave, you can't get out of there unless God resurrects you. Is that what it's saying? Furthermore, despite the evidently abstract nature of Sheol, there is some physicality to it. It was clearly understood to be subterranean, which is further supported by its association with the term bor, in Hebrew, pit, found in Isaiah 14:15, 24:22, and Ezekiel 26:20. It is a land, eretz, contains gates. It is apparently compartmentalized, and there are numerous mentions of its deepest depths and farthest corners. The idea that both the righteous and unrighteous eventually descend to Sheol appears to be an unspoken assumption in the Hebrew Bible. Thus, Jacob and David have no reservation in acknowledging their eventual residency, even as the later prophets spoke of Sheol lying in wait for the wicked. Death awaits you. The grave awaits you. The origins of the concept of Sheol are debated. The general characteristics of an afterlife such as Sheol were not unique to the ancient Israelites. The Babylonians had a similar underworld called Aralu, and the Greeks had one known as Hades. As such, it is assumed that the early Israelites believed that the grave of family or tribe were all united into one.